फेरि पनि सबैजनालाई नमस्कार। म अश्रुता आचार्य अनि अहिले हालै म अमेरिकामा PhD इन इकोनोमिक्समा अध्ययनरत छु। म सन्वीकी अध्यक्ष हुँ र आज प्रस्तुत हुनुभएको सबैजनालाई सन्वीको दोस्रो टक सिरिजमा स्वागत गर्न पाउँदा साह्रै खुसी छु। नेपाल एक अल्पविकसित देश हो, त्यसकारण हाम्रो लागि अर्थशास्त्र विषयको ज्ञान र सचेतना साह्रै महत्त्वपूर्ण छ। त्यसमाथि पनि अर्थ र वित्तीय क्षेत्रमा सरकार राख्ने नेपाली महिलाहरूको कमी भएका कारण नेपाली अर्थशास्त्रीहरूको भूमिका बढोस् भनेर सन्वीको स्थापना भएको थियो 2020 मा। सन्वीका दुईवटा आकांक्षाहरू छन्। पहिलो, यस विषयमा चासो राख्ने नेपाली महिलाहरूको आवाजलाई एकताबद्ध गर्ने र दोस्रो, विश्वभरि छरिनु भएका नेपाली अर्थशास्त्रीहरूको तर्फबाट नेपालको राष्ट्रिय अर्थतन्त्रमा योगदान गर्ने। यही सिलसिलामा आज हामीले डाक्टर जुनी सिंहलाई निम्ति आएका छौँ। त्यसैले ढिलो नगरी म डाक्टर सिंहलाई आफ्नो मन्तव्य सुरु गर्न निम्ति आउँछु।
सुनिराख्नुभएको छ?
Yes.
Okay. So सबैभन्दा पहिला त thank you so much SONWE for giving me this platform and also यो हाम्रो initiative of bringing together women in economics नेपालको लागि चाहिँ, so I would really like to congratulate them for this. अनि मेरो प्रेजेन्टेसनमा चाहिँ I'm going to start with एउटा general overview of field experiments for policy in economics and move on to more research ko barema chai. So it's we're going to look at a novel research method, lab in the field experiment, field experiments bhanne method chai. So I can see audience ma enumerators masanga kaam garnu bhako enumerators pani hununcha, so a big thank you to them kinabhane data collection wouldn't be possible without them. So let me start with introducing myself, मेरो अलिकति background दिएर. I'm also happy to talk about your plans for econ online and offline पछि. And so let me just give you मेरो background अनि त्यसपछि move towards more econ research side मा. Okay. So currently I am at a postdoc at California Institute of Technology. Before this, I was a Weisstock fellow with MIT JPAL. And I finished my PhD recently, 2020, with Paris School of Economics. And a master's also from Paris School. And bachelor's, I did it from St. Stephen's College, Delhi. So my journey to econ has been gradually moving towards a research career. So between master's and PhD, I also worked briefly World Bank lagi, and so that was a different policy experience versus research experience. And so I'm happy to talk about your different career options. What is like the motivation behind PhD? Kosto khalko topic would be interesting, but so just to give you an idea, PhD matter, the idea is really to sort of focus on one particular topic and really look into details. So the idea is you want to answer a question, and so you sort of go towards this career path in research. Let me move on to economics research in general and my use गर्ने method in particular. So we heard about this a lot, evidence-based policy. So what is evidence-based policy and why is it important? So evidence policy is an idea that policy decisions should be based on information and evidence and rigor that has been established with research. And it's very important, particularly for making policies that make an impact in the society. So economics challenge, I think it's important to be able to communicate findings effectively to close the gap between rigorous research and the real world policy problems and public perceptions. It's sort of important for the researcher to be able to communicate beyond just the main research finding. Policy translate I think it's important when it comes to evidence-based policies. अनि अर्को the same part of the coin is also policymakers to be able to act on research finding. किनभने often के हुन्छ भन्दाखेरि we do say we want to do policy based evidence, especially नेपालमा चाहिँ अहिले there's a lot of push for evidence based policy. तर हाम्रो research को main conclusion चाहिँ often it get lost in the way. किनभने हाम्रो policymakers हरूलाई त्यही हिसाबले हैन, so बुझाएर यस्तो यो गर्दा एक्ज्याक्टली यो इन्टरभेन्सनले चाहिँ यस्तो हुन्छ भन्ने कज एन्ड इफेक्ट आइडिया अझै क्ल्यारिटी भयो भने चाहिँ, सो आई थिङ्क द्याट्स अ वे टु गो अबाउट इट when it comes to connecting हाम्रो यो युनिभर्सिटिजहरूमा भइरहेको रिसर्च versus policy in the real world. And the challenge in some sense is for economists to be able to challenge themselves and look beyond the narrow definition of what value is. हामीले इकोनोमिक्समा चाहिँ हामीले तपाईहरुले पढ्नु भएको होला, so we generally say it's about allocation of scarce resources. Resources कसरी efficiently allocate गर्ने, हाम्रो benefit र cost के छ भन्ने हिसाबले चाहिँ we think in terms of more money भनौं न. So the challenge is really to provide a more holistic view of how non-economists think, so that we can effectively communicate with them. So the idea is we think about other concerns like this, the behavioral concern or behavioral biases or there might also be other things except just cost and benefit, like decency in work, for instance. So your different components on that. So we should the way forward is to be able to incorporate them when it comes to our research and thinking. In economics particularly, is it okay if I switch between English and Nepali, or what do you prefer?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes. So when it comes to research in economics, there are many ways to go about doing research. So research is just the idea is to create evidence and data and new data collect. The idea is to come up with credible evidence. And there are mainly like two major ways to go about this. One is qualitative research, which is more based on focus group discussions, interviews. You take a subsample and sort of more text-based analysis, qualitative. And then there is the other way, which is quantitative, and the idea really being we have collected data, or we already have existing data sets. So these are two ways of looking at quantitative analysis. But let's say AFE survey, village organizations survey a primary data collection. And the second is sort of use your existing data set and the secondary data collection. And as an economist, we sort of mix and match your data methods. Probably economics puts more weight on the quantitative data set and sort of analyzing numerical data rigorously, and statistics use. So more and more that is the trend. But the challenge really is your data collection, we have like this coherent message to give to policymakers that in terms of communication, there needs to be a trust between the public and the economist. And so so there is a poll about who do people trust most. Not surprisingly, doctors are the ones who people trust most in terms of profession. And economists say they're around 25%, which is not a very good place to be. They're right above politicians who are at 12%. So this idea of then building a trust between public economists is also, I think, a challenge, and is important to for us to think about as a profession. So in particular, your research methods, there are different ways to go about how I analyze the data set. Let's say we are very focused on causality economics, which basically means anything can be correlated in some sense. So correlation let's say यो event भएमा अर्को event हुने कतिको chance छ भन्ने, so that's sort of a reasoning. तर correlation does not imply causation. Causation भन्नाले चाहिँ यो event ले गर्दाखेरि चाहिँ so यो मैले यो training दिएको बापत चाहिँ increase in employment भयो, for instance. So this is like a direct causality versus correlation. So you do it separate. We spend a lot of time, especially in economic research, and to establish causality, there are multiple methods to go about it. एउटा चाहिँ हाम्रो natural experiment या quasi experiment भनिन्छ. So the idea is जस्तै policy perspective ma Nepalma, we want to understand the effect of minimum wage. So the idea is minimum wage, maybe kune district ma minimum wage sa hola, kune ma chaina hola. So we're going to compare the difference between the two and understand what's happening. So that is like a natural experiment example. Another idea is to do sort of randomized controlled trials or field experiments. So when I say randomized controlled trials, your idea is say we randomize your treatment पाउँछ भन्ने हिसाबले चाहिँ it's very close to clinical trials. जस्तै COVID vaccine को example दिँदाखेरि they ran randomized controlled trials where एउटा treatment group let's say they gave the vaccine and then there was a control group who was not given the vaccine. And the idea was to compare and contrast your beta group to understand the effect of the vaccine. So economics is also heavily influenced by this clinical trial idea, which is known as randomized controlled trials or field experiments. And we're going to be looking at field experiments in particular, your paper. So just to give you a heads up, field experiment, I'm going to go through the nitty-gritties and technicalities of field experiment. You have any questions, please feel free to like write in the chat box, or just like jump in with questions between the talk. And also we're doing sort of another round of data collection with the randomized control trials September, and we're looking for research coordinators to sort of help us with the fieldwork. So if you guys are interested, just feel free to shoot me an email. So what are randomized control trials? So I'm not sure I'm audience randomized control trials, but the idea is really it's a policy tool. So it's going to be used for you couldn't say policy गर्दाखेरि चाहिँ सबसे effective हुन्छ. जस्तै मैले example दिँदाखेरि एउटा village मा I want to improve I want to push women towards entrepreneurship, हैन. So त्यो गर्दाखेरि चाहिँ के दिँदाखेरि चाहिँ राम्रो हुन्छ, ट्रेनिङ दिँदाखेरि इफेक्टिभ हुन्छ कि उहाँहरूलाई ग्रुप सेसन दिँदाखेरि इफेक्टिभ हुन्छ कि या जस्ट अरूहरूको एक्जाम्पल दिँदा इफेक्टिभ हुन्छ कि या क्याश ग्रान्ट दिएर इफेक्टिभ हुन्छ, हैन. सो व्हाट इज द मोस्ट इफेक्टिभ पोलिसी भन्नाले यो क्वेशनलाई आन्सर गर्न चाहिँ आई थिंक आरसीटी इज अ टुल. आरसीटी भन्नाले र्यान्डमाइज कन्ट्रोल ट्रायल इज अ टुल which is very popular अहिले हाम्रो पोलिसी वर्ल्डमा. So your idea is just a village lady and your total sample of women. And so the idea is then I divide them into treatment or control, where treatment I give them the training, I give them the intervention, and control I do nothing. I don't give the treatment or intervention. So the idea is then your intervention deko bapat let's say kati janako outcome change huncha bhanne hisabले चाहिँ. So we want to see the impact of this training. So in order to compare your training काम गर्यो कि गरेन भन्नाले जस्तै यो example मा चाहिँ it's an example where I'm looking at obtained a job as an outcome, and job पाए कि पाएन भन्ने हिसाबले. So you see like your treatment group मा हाम्रो 1 2 3 4 हाम्रो 4 जना women ले job पाउनु भयो भने control group मा 1 जनाले. So the idea is to say on an average it is जनाले women ले हाम्रो intervention बाट कामको पाउनु भयो, so our intervention is effective भन्ने. Like simply put, that's the idea of randomizing and doing this control trials. And randomize चाहिँ किन गर्नुपर्छ भन्दाखेरि चाहिँ the idea is treatment र control एकदमै different भयो भने चाहिँ maybe your outcomes is not driven by your intervention, but it's just उनीहरूको own characteristics. So it's not the intervention per se. So त्यो criticism like shut down गर्नलाई चाहिँ, so the idea is to randomly allocate गर्यो भने on an average treatment or control groups is similar हुनुपर्छ, and so we are therefore going to look at their outcomes भन्ने हिसाबले. So like I just explained, randomly allocating people to be either in the treatment group versus the control group. And the outcomes, you're really going to compare percentage of people in each group who end up finding a job. So you can think of outcome in multiple sense. You can think of outcome, which is how many people get immunized, how many kids get immunized, education, how many kids attend school, for instance. So there are a lot of RCTs in different direction, different research question like answer गर्न. So this is a very effective tool. Do we have any questions at this point? RCTs ko barema ya field experiments ko barema in general? Very good.
I have a question. So outcome हजुरले percentage of people in each group भनेर भन्नुभयो नि. So हामीले hypothesis testing पनि गर्नुपर्छ, like t-stat use गरेर averagesहरु compare गर्ने. त्यो गर्न नै पर्छ कि like percentage मै रोक्दा पनि हुन्छ?
So percentage ma चाहिँ, so the first stage is like looking at percentage, and then to be more rigorous, किनभने we were really interested in your statistically significant छ कि छैन भनेर. So that's the term that we use. किनभने percentage difference, कतिको percentage difference ठुलो त भन्ने question आउँछ हैन. जस्तै 20% versus 80% छ भने is the difference big enough? यदि 40 र 60 छ भने is the difference big enough? यो difference big enough छ कि छैन भन्नाले चाहिँ then we fall upon statistical estimation लाई हैन. So I'm not covering statistical estimation but then the idea is to run annually भने जस्तै hypothesis testing हैन, t-test हामीले technical term चाहिँ t-test भन्छ, which is basically to say statistically term मा हैन यो effect कतिको significant छ भनेर चाहिँ we're just going to compare your same means, percentage of people means मा तर in a more rigorous manner with हाम्रो tool say generally we use Stata or R as programming languages to look at these differences.
Okay, thank you.
And so just to move you towards trends in journal publications, so economics ma चाहिँ हामीले data collect गर्यो हैन, हामीले data analyze गर्यो, तर यो communicate गर्न पनि it's very important. Particularly हाम्रो academia ma चाहिँ we their journal publications which basically communicate the research findings. And so यसमा चाहिँ I'm trying to show you the trend of the popularity of field experiments हैन. यो Baldessari et al. 2015 paper, but I've extracted this graph. अनि हामीले देख्छ कि so most of the articles that are upward sloping, your 1, 2, 3, your top 3 say they are economics articles, except your green one is political science. The economics ma so there is a lot of weightage given to randomized control trials, to field experiments, particularly because your impact ko kura चाहिँ they're sort of pushing the boundaries beyond just cost and benefit analysis to something that's innovative, something that's new. So this has sort of been the trend. So it's a very popular method of analyzing data sets or of collecting data sets and doing research in economics. You were to say I'm going to move more towards my research project. Research project, we're going to look at social network data in particular. I'll explain to you more in detail what do I mean by social network. And then also look towards the impact of this network structure on cooperation level village within the village, in one of the villages, in one of the municipalities in Makwanpur district.
Dr. Singh, I had a question or a remark to me. I was going to make a comment. How many? Just say about experimentally, a project design going by, this we got a statistically significant result that the intervention was effective. How do we know that that intervention is sustainable? To the very expertly determine solution to society. So like take to community line empower intervention how can we be confident as economists?
So that's an interesting point. Or let's say I think more and more the idea is like experiment design we conduct focus group discussions. We do like a baseline survey to get an idea of effective community ma kasto khalko demand cha bhanne hisabले we sort of tend to in some sense bridge the gap between what the community needs and what we want to provide. So that would be like one solution. But scaling up, I think, is a whole different conversation altogether. मैले एउटा डिस्ट्रिक्टमा गरे हैन, मैले काठमाडौँमा गरे, what is then the scalability across the country भन्ने हिसाबले चाहिँ. So this is upcoming field in हाम्रो experiments भित्रै कसरी चाहिँ यो स्केल अप गर्ने, कुन चाहिँ आइडिया चाहिँ is worth scaling up versus which ideas are not scaling up भन्ने हिसाबले चाहिँ I think that there's a vast literature that looks at that, and the idea is really scalability को लागि चाहिँ you sort of look at what was the average impact, and your average impact गर्न चाहिँ कतिको कस्ट छ अनि is it worth sort of scaling भन्ने question सोधेर चाहिँ the impact को हिसाबले चाहिँ, so we decide if you want to scale it or not. And I think especially like Nepalको context मा चाहिँ I think if we do some interventions in the local government setting, यो local र हाम्रो central government को bridge चाहिँ कसरी gap गर्ने भन्ने, this another more political question that comes in when it comes to scalability. Can you please add more on ideal experiment? So idea experiment ma Siddharth, let's so I'm going to move more towards the experiment, and you I'm experiment design so this is what I'm going to present next. So just to motivate so we are interested in looking at community-based cooperation and how we can improve cooperation within communities. And you're going to be seeing your motivation slide, which is Nepal. There are loads of community-based organizations, and community-based development is sort of an institution that is pushed for in general when it comes to development. So you'll say Amro share of community forest user groups within Nepal. So as we see, like starting from 1990 to current date, there has been an upsoar of increase in the number of community forest groups within Nepal. Resources which are maintained by the community. Ani yo chai मैले Libwa et al भन्ने पेपरबाट 2021 को पेपरबाट एक्सट्र्याक्ट गरेको ग्राफ हो. And so the idea is really then, given that the communities are playing this important role of protecting resources, taking care of certain aspect of the village, it's important to understand what works in terms of cooperation and what does not work. And so I'm a paper we're going to be looking at one policy question in particular, which is how do you improve cooperation within communities? And particularly if communities are monitored, does it help to improve cooperation? So I just gave you an example of community forest groups. And projects are based on and the different projects around the world, which is based on this concept of communities managing resources. And so your paper, we're basically going to focus on the mechanisms that work with managing resources and how we can improve their level of cooperation. Generally, I would say, in absence of strong formal institutions, there are local communities that are responsible for the community, for projects. Example, they could say community forest groups. You can think of poverty funds, like multiple projects which are managed at the level of the community. And the idea is that we can improve the level of cooperation within such a setting. Let's say we're going to be looking at one particular mechanism, which is peer monitoring. So the idea is that everybody is going to behave in a certain manner in the community. Actions is observable within the society. And so peer monitoring is very effective, mainly in a very small community setting. So there is more strong effect of having your action being observed. So why is this effective? There are two parts to this. There might be some punishment mechanism. Forest user group there are some negative punishment that I need to face. Or another explanation could be Ostrom. First, she was the first women in economics to win a Nobel Prize, and she has very interesting work on reputation concern, particularly mechanisms based on social ties. Let's say policy inform in terms of provision of public goods in the economy. So your project, we're going to be look at demand for such a mechanism, demand for peer monitoring. In particular, we're going to be focusing on reputation concern. So how does your worry of your reputation impact focusing your focus on improving cooperation? So your link, let's say, we were going to be studying more in the upcoming slides. And your cooperation भन्दाखेरि चाहिँ, so we all know what we mean by cooperation, हैन? तर किन चाहिँ cooperation important छ भन्ने कुरा पनि we have established by now. So the idea is then cooperation को लागि चाहिँ what is important for cooperation? And is your question मा चाहिँ we bring into the picture reputation concern and social network. So the idea really is that individuals, we rely on local connections, especially in a village setting, we rely on people for risk sharing, for information, for public good, and so on and so forth. So it's important to maintain a network within the village, friendships or network within the village. And यसमा चाहिँ cooperation then becomes important किनभने if I don't cooperate in this village setting, I am going to be sort of ostracized and not be a part of the village discussion. And there is a lot of literature which looks at network position. Let's say, so where am I based in within the village network? Versus how do I behave is sort of correlated. So your paper, they show how people who are friends, they tend to trust each other more, and they tend to have a greater level of cooperation versus people who don't know each other. So for a village context, even though we are acquaintances, we don't know each other very well. On a setting, how do I then assure that there is some level of cooperation within the village? In particular, your paper, they look at cooperation that are not with people that know each other, but people who do not know each other very well. So we're in the same village. We're living in Makwanpur district in a village, and we know each other, but not so well. So त्यो सिचुएसनमा चाहिँ कसरी मैले level of cooperation चाहिँ बढाउने भन्ने हिसाबले चाहिँ that's sort of the research question. In particular, saying यदि, so the main question is saying, if I give you the chance to elect a monitor, so yadi I will tell you, okay, this is a project, a community level project, and do you want a monitor to be there? So do you want your project to be monitored? The questions would like demand in terms of monitoring outside. So this is like our main research question. अनि त्यसले चाहिँ कस्तो खालको behavior in the society ल्याउँछ. So if there is a monitor versus there is no monitor, how does it then change in terms of behavior of individuals? So in particular, हामीले चाहिँ दुईटा different खालको ग्रुपलाई हेर्दैछौँ. One is group of friends versus group of people who don't know each other very well. So group of friends लाई चाहिँ हामीले dense या closely knit भन्छौँ, अनि group of people who don't know each other लाई चाहिँ sparse group भनेर we are going to be looking at this data analysis. What do we do, Matsi? So the idea is, I'm going to quickly just give you an overall picture, and then I'm going to go into greater details of each of these components. So we're going to start with our network survey, which is basically to get an idea of who is connected to whom within the village. And your network survey, we're going to be using it for identifying connections, so to understand the group composition and to understand village central, so to understand the monitor options. And so the idea is to then run a lab in the field experiment, describe a small experiment to understand contribution level, how can you improve that level of contribution in a larger setting. And so the larger setting contribution study, we're going to be making them play a set of games technically in schools within these villages to understand their behavior. In terms of contribution, so I will quickly move through your contribution. Economics literature, it's threefold: understanding institutions that are chosen by people versus institutions that are assigned randomly. And then we're also looking at the role of social networks, the role of communities, and कसरी that dictates the demand of monitors within the economy. And then we're also going to be looking at reputation and other regarding preferences. So how much do I care about my reputation in the society, and how does that motivate me to behave in a certain manner? So the idea is, I think reputation idea is pretty much summarized by the saying in Nepal in general, which I'm not a big fan of, but the saying what does the society like samajle ke bhन्छ भन्ने हिसाबले. So that's the idea of reputation basically, हैन. So मैले यो गरे भने मैले कोअपरेट नगरे भने एउटा सेटिङमा मेरो साथीहरूले के भन्छ. So that sort of reputation को सेटिङलाई चाहिँ हामीले युज गरेर we are trying to ensure that we can improve the level of cooperation using हाम्रो यो intervention. And so your result preview I'm just going to skip so that we can look at the study design and then look at it in more details. So I'm going to define more about experiment. I'm a question so a little bit more about experiment. And at this point, she said we're going to look at your network survey and overall like design of the experiment. Do you have any questions at this point about the introduction bit, like cost of mechanisms we're looking at?
I had a question about the sparse group just participants didn't know each other. This forest like use गर्ने कुनै न कुनै mechanism त थियो होला. So is that state governed or त्यो forest कसले चलाउने हो अनि कसले के गर्न पाउने भनेर कसरी decide हुन्छ?
It's at the level of the community. So त्यही भएर चाहिँ it's like a community based project भनौं न. So community मा committee हुन्छ and they decide sort of कसरी यो manage गर्ने भन्ने हिसाबले चाहिँ. And so the idea is that किनभने communities are given that important responsibility, हैन. So how can we ensure that they cooperate in such a setting? One question, let's say. So that's like a motivating example, and then we're going to be looking at more examples and experiment.
So they are all a part of the community and the committee to decide what happens to the forest. That a personal connection is sparse determinant.
Exactly.
Okay.
We can be in the same school, and we can be either best friends and having lunch together at this every day, or we can be like sparsely connected in the sense that we're in the same class, we're in the same batch, but in different sections. So that sort of idea. So your location say we're going to look at rural Makwanpur. I'm some काम गर्नु भएको दुईटा enumerators हाम्रो chatमा हुनुहुन्छ. So they know more about the setting and then how we went about collecting this data set. हाम्रो rural Makwanpurमा चाहिँ we covered यो experiment को लागि चाहिँ 19 middle villages, Bajrabarai, Palung र Chitlangमा, and we did like another round of network elicitation survey recently हाम्रो September 2020 मा. So we added another 15 villages to the count. And your village size say to give you an idea, on an average there are around 70 to 100 households per village. And so we sample in particular women between 18 to 60 years old. Given high migration rate of men in these villages, we focused on women within the village. And your network survey they are really questions to cover multidimensional relations. So we ask तपाईलाई 100 रुपैयाँ चाहिएमा कोसँग सोध्नुहुन्छ या यदि तपाईलाई कि इमर्जेन्सी पर्यो भने कोसँग हेल्प माग्नुहुन्छ भन्ने हिसाबले चाहिँ. So we ask like these questions along different dimensions, and on the basis of this we were able to form what we call the network map. So the idea being, so if I ask Ashruta, तिम्रो साथीहरु को हुनुहुन्छ भनेर, and so let's say she says Samana, Annie, Prashamsa भनेर. So उहाँहरु चार जना चाहिँ would be like a link, a connected link किनभने these are her friends, So that's the idea of network survey. And what we did was हाम्रो 19 villages now we asked every woman within the village to get an idea of your connections. To show you an example, so this is what the network map looks like. And this is one of the villages that we covered, probably in Palung. And your idea say every circle is a woman in the village, and your link say established between two women if any of them says that you're friends. So for people who have collected this data set, let's say we collect your relations co link, and you say we sort of formalize this on the basis of this network map. So your network map here, I can say, like, for instance, your person Z3 is removed from the network, is not very central to the network, whereas your person MD172 is more central within the network setting, you know. So we then use this network to for two functions. So we have a question on sampling. So हामीले कसरी sample गर्यो भन्दाखेरि it's similar to snowball sampling. Snowball भन्नाले चाहिँ so हामीले एकजना महिलालाई सोध्यो हैन, अनि उहाँको साथीहरुलाई then we covered उहाँको साथीहरु अनि उहाँको साथीहरु गरेर so यसरी snowball effect भनेर भनिन्छ. So what we did was snowball, but at the same time, because we had the census of everybody within the village, so local government, let's say, they provided us with a census of every woman in the village. So we made sure that we covered everybody within these villages. So different snowball seeds got it. So we sort of covered everybody in the village. So the problem with snowball sampling is it might change who I cover in terms of my total sample depending on who I start with. And we made sure that we did a snowball sampling, but also complementing it with the census. So we made sure that everybody within the village is covered, not just a subsample of the total women. And ESCO basis, we are going to be assigning monitor roles. So monitor roles is basically, mentioned, do you want to be monitored? We're going to be asking them in the experiment. And what we did was, so your diagram, you can see. So this was the network that I showed you before. And the idea is that the person who circled in red is going to be somebody who's central. Right? So this is the idea of being central versus somebody in the periphery. I'm in the same village as you, so we assign you duita monitor roles. And on top of that, we also had what we call randomization of groups. So randomization of group, let's say, so if I go back to the diagram, you individual, let's say, so your triangle is, we are all friends, we are dense group, we're closely related. Whereas sparse group, sparse would be somebody within this, so far away from each other in the network. So that is the idea of these two different group composition. So now I'm going to move towards the study design. I should leave 15 minutes for questions, Enma. So let me, I don't have much time. So let me focus on study design particularly, and the results I can just summarize quickly. So I'm a study design, this is how we designed the experiment. So we started off by randomizing individuals in different groups. So let's say let's say Ashruta. Ashruta is living in Makwanpur, and so we are trying to understand Makwanpur cooperation improve. So we're going to be assigning Ashruta once to a group with her friends, which we call dense group, versus once in a group with her acquaintances, which is sparse group. So you do take group composition interact, and the idea is there a difference between interaction in these two different group compositions? And so from this group composition, we move on to a more, the first stage is voting. Do you want a monitor? If you do want a monitor, your monitor choose, that's the voting question. And if you do vote for a monitor, you have to pay certain amount for voting for a monitor at the level of the individual. And this is followed by randomizing order. So experiment, you're going to play with the monitor of your choice that the group elects, and once you're going to play with a monitor of our choice. And so we're going to randomize this order of who you're going to play with first. And this is followed by what we call in economics contribution game. Let's say economics ma कसरी cooperation behavior measure गर्ने त भन्ने हिसाबले चाहिँ we have this game that we make individuals play. I'm going to describe more in greater details what the game actually was. So अघि मैले mention गरेको जस्तै, so this is the subset of the total sample हामीले हेरेको. So this woman circled in green is assigned once a dense group, once a sparse group, and so these are two different group composition. And then there is this voting round. We tell the women, do you want to vote for a high central monitor, low central monitor, no monitor? Paper match, they just have to tick who they want the monitor to be, or if they don't want any monitor. And the role of the monitor is just to observe the actions of women within the village. And so this is a typical contribution game, which I will explain in detail. But the idea is that kukule kati contribute garyo bhanne information is not publicly available. So the idea is that if you want to make sure everybody contributes by your reputation ko hisabले, then it's a good idea to elect the monitor so that she can observe everybody's contribution and then see exactly how they're performing. So the idea is that yadi मैले monitor elect garyo bhane, people become conscious of the fact that they're being observed and hence behave in a certain manner. So randomizing order, it's important to sort of randomize your treatment, say, to both control and treatment groups. So the idea is actually say you're going to play with a monitor of your choice, and once you're going to play with a monitor of our choice. So when I say play, what is the game that I'm talking about? So this is the contribution game. So experimental economics, we have different sets of games, behavior, like collect garna kinabhane. So this data, cooperate data say it's hard to get along. Primary, secondary data collection. So we have data on census. Nepal, we have census data sets. We have analysis data sets which look at individual characteristics that are cooperation as such. They measure gana garo bhako. So we do this in a lab in the field setting. We invite these women to schools and tell them, so each of you will be given 10 tokens of different colors. And the idea is that the 10 tokens, you need to decide how many tokens you want to put in a public pot versus how many tokens you want to keep for yourself. So whatever token you contribute to the public pot is going to increase in value by 50% and then is equally distributed. Irrespective of your initial contribution. So we make them play this game. I'm a school in groups of 3 where they can see each other. And so the idea is that your blue color command, let's say, matre token contribute gare tapani, at the end she ends up getting a lot of tokens, because the public pot is equally distributed. So the idea being, मैले contribute nagare tapani, I have a probability, or I have a chance of getting money. So this is this idea of free riding in economics. And they say we measure them. So we made each woman play your game in 2 different group settings and observing how many tokens she contributes. So that's the data set that we have. So moving on to the experiment. And at the end of the game, the idea was कसरी incentivize गर्ने भन्दाखेरि चाहिँ we told them one of the rounds in random we will be तपाईले चाहिँ जति त्यो राउन्डमा कमाउनुहुन्छ त्यही हिसाबले चाहिँ we're going to pay you at the end of the day. So on an average, women ended up getting around 250 rupees per game. So this is just like the overall setting of the experiment. Idea being you're in 2 different group compositions in 3 different monitoring institutions you choose, and then we try to understand how that affects your cooperation level. To give you a summary of our participants, we are around 70% of the women were similar caste groups, and on an average people had 10 connections. In terms of education, they had around 3 years of primary education. And were around 35 years approximately. Monitors are so the people who were central and people who were periphery were very similar in terms of characteristics, maybe slightly higher education for the high central monitor, high central banality, the more influential monitor in this setting. I would like to go through the mechanism and results that we only have 15 minutes, right, Ashruta? So let me do this. Let me then probably skip the mechanism and just go to the result. And so let me just give you an idea of what are we thinking. So we're thinking that if I'm playing with my friends, if I know you people, I will trust you and hence not spend money on electing a monitor. But if we don't know each other, the idea is that if you don't know each other, I don't know how much you would contribute in this game. Even if you don't contribute anything, there's a chance of you getting equal number of tokens. So I tend to vote for a monitor when I am in sparse group. So our hypothesis is already, I'm with my friends, I cooperate better, hence I don't need a monitor, versus when I'm playing with acquaintances / strangers, I have a different way of thinking about monitoring. So let me quickly show you हाम्रो रिजल्टमा चाहिँ. So very much confirming our hypothesis. हामीले देख्छ कि हाम्रो dense groups, हाम्रो friendsसँग हुँदाखेरि चाहिँ you tend to vote for no monitor more than voting for a high central monitor. Your low central monitor is not very often chosen किनभने the whole point of monitor is that I observe your actions and I can communicate your actions to other people in the village. So if I'm somebody who's central, if I have many friends, I can say, oh, yo falanale ta contribute garena yo game ma, and that can sort of have negative reputation concerns, and hence I am incentivized to contribute in a certain manner. And you say this was in a contribution in exogenous case. Exogenous भन्नाले चाहिँ if you randomly assign a monitor, so high central monitor like randomly assign गर्यो भने, so you see dense groups मा चाहिँ त्यतिको difference देखिदैन, whereas sparse group मा चाहिँ even though the difference seems to be of 1 rupees, 4.67 versus 5.41, the increase is around 15% of the mean, and it is statistically significant in terms of the change. So going back to the point of any statistical test किन run गर्नुपर्छ भन्दाखेरि चाहिँ, so in terms of relative numbers this might seem low, but in terms of statistical differences this is more sound when it comes to comparing these two numbers. So your message is really dense groups मा चाहिँ we are already contributing well, so we don't need a monitor, even though 5.3 is not a wow contribution. We expected this to be higher. So there's also this question of किन चाहिँ dense group मा contribution भइरहेको छैन भन्ने हिसाबले. And then यता चाहिँ I'm going to be looking at contribution with the presence of a monitor, हैन. So monitor मैले elect गरेको monitor versus मलाई randomly assign भएको monitor मा के difference छ भन्ने हिसाबले. So you say this is for sparse groups, this is for dense groups. So we again see that sparse group मा पनि मैले आफै monitor choose गरेको भए चाहिँ I contribute or I cooperate more than randomly being assigned a monitor. So the key message really is dense groups already have these mechanisms to cooperate within their circle, irrespective of the monitoring institution. Whereas sparse group मा चाहिँ मैले जबरजस्ती एउटा monitor assign गर्नुको सट्टा उहाँहरूलाई नै do you want to elect a monitor भन्यो भने चाहिँ the level of cooperation is better in the society. So let me stop at this and take questions for discussion. We have around 10 minutes for questions. Yeah, 10-15 minutes. I can go over time if you guys have more questions.
So while the guests are cooking up their questions, so now that you've found this result, especially sparse group मा चाहिँ impact बनाउन सकिने रहेछ भनेर result आइसकेपछि, what does the real life look like? So do we go with this result to the local government and say, okay, यस्तो हो रहेछ, हजुर अबदेखि coordination अथवा यो cooperation बढाउन मन छ भने चाहिँ यस्तो गर्नु भनेर उनीहरूलाई like local authority लाई भन्ने हो कि त्यही community लाई नै यो information दिने हो such that they can reinforce this, like awareness and reinforcement देखिनको लागि हो कि like what is the practicality portion?
So यसमा चाहिँ हामीले what we did was we were working with the local governments, हैन. So हाम्रो municipality थाहा नगरपालिकामा, and so your result hypothesis, so we sort of communicated this to them. So first I think we told them about your overall connection levels within the village, हैन. You have a village network, and then your message, let's say, so what we did was we highlighted the importance of giving people a choice. So we went to the local government and said, your overall cooperation say village ma esto khalko huncha. So in order to like improve cooperation to local governments or even international organizations, so we basically said like small scale projects don't randomly assign monitors to these groups. So because often they hand over sums of money to people in these villages, and in the end people end up not using the money, or they end up having a third party who is coming to observe their behaviors, and your third party monitoring in some sense. So the message is even without the monitor, the cooperation level is somewhat high, but to improve the cooperation level, you outside but a mansi बनाउनु भन्दा पनि यो हामीले जस्तै हामीले देखेको छ यो आफैले चुज गरेको monitor is more effective in improving cooperation level. So we can think of community forest groups, for instance. We can think of poverty funds that are handed over to the communities, and so on and so forth. I'm going to put this slide to that. So this was our field team in 2018. We conducted this in 2018. Do we have more questions about the methods? Yeah, because I can assume that your experiment is a bit technical and complicated. So I'm happy to like walk you through the steps. How do you design an experiment? What's the purpose of an experiment? Yeah, Isha.
Hi, Disu. Thank you so much for your presentation. I really appreciated it. And I really appreciated the participatory approach that you employed. I'm studying my master's in international agriculture development in UC Davis अहिले. अनि म पनि नेपालमा चाहिँ I'm trying to come over summer for my research. अनि I just wanted to ask two questions about method section. एउटा चाहिँ हजुरको यो रिसर्च गर्न you did it in like 15 villages. So कति समय लाग्यो थियो रिसर्च गर्नलाई मलाई हजुर भनिदिन मिल्छ होला. अनि अर्को क्वेशन चाहिँ there's this big ethical debate about compensating your interview participants or research participants monetary way मा अथवा other non-monetary way. अनि how did you come about navigating that particular thing? I just wanted to have idea about those two things. Thank you.
Thank you, Isha. So the idea say in 19 villages ma say how much time it took panale. So designing took almost a year. So designing is like the big part of actually field ma gaera data collection gareपछि चाहिँ ला यो यसरी गर्नुपर्छ है collection भन्ने हिसाबले चाहिँ, so there is no going back. So design, let's say we took around 1 year, and also collection of funds took some time. But in terms of village ma pugeपछि यो apply गर्न, we were there for 1.5 months. So we were able to collect data sets and do the experiment within the time period of 1.5 months. It was very intensive though. And in terms of ethical debate about paying the participants, so first survey we were not paying the participants. So when we took the network survey, when we took information at the household level, we didn't pay the participants. But when it comes to experiment, so economics they are very particular about being incentivized. So the whole idea is that if you don't incentivize people, their behavior might change because they have no purpose of your game. So there should be an incentive so that they pay attention to the game, they act in a certain way. And so in order to sort of overcome this ethical debate, we did have to get IRB once. So before any field work, particularly in experiments, you need to get a clearance from your university or from another university, which is known as International Ethics Board. So the idea is that you say, okay, this is the experiment we're thinking about. There is no negative externality for people in the village, and we're just paying them in terms of the time that they spent for the experiment. So experiment, it took us at least every woman was there for, let's say, around 15 to 20, 30 minutes. And so the idea is that because we invited them to the experiment, because we took so much of their time, your time, so also you have to keep in mind that these women have other things to do, and then they have better things to do in life, and they have to take care of their kids, they have to do all these work in the field, they have to do agriculture, so they're very like time pressed. So when it comes to like house to house survey, it's sort of easier to get them काम गरिरहेको बेलामा तपाई काम गर्दै गर्नुस् and I'm going to like take a survey भन्ने हिसाबले. But when it comes to experiment, they really need to make that extra effort of keeping some time aside, so बच्चाहरुलाई स्कुल पुराउनु सट्टा they came to this experiment. So त्यो भएको भएर चाहिँ, so I think it makes sense to compensate them for their time. So the idea is we compensate them with half the wage for the day. So 250 was around half of the wage they would get if they were in the field, for instance. So that's how we went about it. We have a question from Prabesh Thakal, more about experimental design. Propensity score during randomization. So this is more technical. So you can randomize along different lines, so there is so in our case we didn't do any propensity score calculation. We were just randomizing at the level of the village. So level of the village ma treatment or control garera we were doing. So this is also not a full scale RCT. This is a more toned down lab in the field experiment. When you do an RCT, if you want to do a more RCT, we also do what we call stratified randomization, meaning I'm going to, instead of just saying treatment or control, I'm going to look at, let's say, gender and education. And so I'm going to look at your duita variables, and I'm going to categorize people into groups in terms of gender and education. And then I'm going to randomize within these groups. And so if you want to do this stratified randomization on one characteristics, depending on your research question. So the answer really is your propensity score matching stratified randomization. It would really depend on what is the variable that you're after. And so if you believe your stratifies effectiveness of the treatment would be increased by one, the idea is to then do the stratified randomization with propensity scoring. Otherwise, it's just the simple randomly assigning people across treatment and control group should work. Do we have more questions on experiment, in economics research in general?
If there are no other questions from the guests, I was actually curious, अहिलेको Caltechमा चाहिँ कस्तो खालको काम भइरहेको छ अनि are you furthering your experimental studies or अहिले graduate भइसकेपछि चाहिँ field आफ्नो sub field switch गर्न पनि सजिलो हुन्छ कि हुँदैन? So could you say a little bit about that?
So in terms of, so let me go step by step. So in terms of my project, so this was my project in my PhD 2018, and I'm still working on like getting this paper published. Publication but I have a couple of projects in the same villages. I'm a rural Makwanpurma, and now we're moving away from cooperation towards more entrepreneurship. So I'm going to say questions, how can we improve or how can we move women towards entrepreneurship, given that there is a demand for women to be entrepreneurs, or there's a willingness to be entrepreneurs. So this is a RCT that we want to run in the month of September. So I was in Nepal September 2022. We got this research fund from WISE organization, and we were able to sort of partner up with this place called Governance Lab. So this was part in partnership with Rooster Logic in Nepal, or let's say we're partnering with Governance Lab in Nepal, and so the idea is to then with a set of enumerators and research coordinator run a new set of experiments in September. And so there's a lot of flexibility when it comes to research in terms of what you want to work in. So you're not like dictated by somebody else's agenda. So you're very free to choose. Your question answer versus your question. I think there only needs to be that you're answering the question because there's a need from the community for the question to be answered. So not just like a random question out of the blue, no, but so that's basically the idea of my future projects going forward. So we're going to look at entrepreneurship, we're going to look at adoption of environment-friendly technologies within these villages, given your social network data that we collected. And we also have two of our enumerators who helped us with not this data collection, but a second wave of data collection who are in the chat right now. So they also have a good idea of how we do this data collection. And we're also looking for, like I mentioned, Tokma, research coordinators. So maybe people who've done at least bachelor's or maybe master's in economics to go to the field with us in September. So September, October, November, 2022. So I'd also be happy to like talk more about that in terms of the needs of being a research coordinator. Anita's second question, let's say, was about how can you then switch fields, and is it possible to switch fields once you've picked one? So I think so what I did in my masters is not necessarily 100% correlated with what I ended up doing in my PhD. So I think in the start of the PhD, everybody starts with a research question. It sort of evolves. Then you decide, okay, this is not really, maybe I was interested in trade and I say, okay, trade is not what I'm interested in anymore. I want to do more development, more behavioral. So I think there's always space to not completely switch, but like move towards different directions within the same stream when it comes to econ, especially master's or beginning of PhD. But I feel like once you move more and more towards specialization on a topic, then you pretty much rest around the vicinity of the topic. Just micro, so I want to do macro and government policies in macro and inflation one. Let's say, so that doesn't work because my specialty is more in micro and more in developing setting when it comes to your different kind of interventions. And so let's say, I think there's always space to discover new things. There's always space to be involved in multiple projects and just sort of see what interests you more. But once you've done a PhD and you are in a postdoc position, the idea is to then continue on with what you've done before. That's also your specialization, right? And you can always co-author with people who have similar interests and have maybe a specialization in machine learning, for instance. So you can always like merge research interest and collaborate. But in terms of the main specialization, I think PhD it sort of remains in a particular direction. I mean, of course, you can move from closely related topics. So I can do political econ, I can do behavioral, I can do experiments and mix these topics, but not to a completely drastically different topics like trade or macro, for instance.
Great. Well, I think यो चाहिँ प्रोग्रामको अन्तिम जस्तो लागिरहेको छ मलाई. Thank you so much, Dr. Singh, for giving us your time. It was a great presentation. If you have any questions, go email चाहिँ actually chat box मा पठाइदिनु. Perfect. Awesome. So
email and Twitter.
Yeah. So if anyone's interested in the research associate position, and if you have a flyer or anything like that, I could circulate it out amongst our people as well.
I'll do that.
Okay. Well, thank you everyone for attending today. हामीले यो session record गरेको छौं अनि we will be uploading it soon. So if you would like to go back to it or anything like that, you'll be able to.
Thank you so much, guys, and thank you for the audience for being there. And I'm happy to like answer questions offline, and feel to send me an email and we can discuss about econ and research in general and economics in Nepal, public policy and so on. Thank you.